All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I am your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. We're back at it again. Just in case anybody is concerned, and I suspect unless you live in Florida, you are not so much concerned, but just in case. Yeah, we're doing okay here with all the cold weather. I get it. The folks upstairs, the folks up north, not upstairs, same difference, I guess. The folks up north have it way worse. But just remember, when you're criticizing Florida, and you're like, oh, it's not so bad down there. It could be worse. It could be like, negative, whatever, wherever I am, right? Just remember, we're not used to this. You guys are. Every winter, you guys up north get snow and sleet and you get frigid weather. We don't necessarily get that down here. So this is kind of like out of the ordinary for us. So we're on the struggle bus, but we're surviving. All right, what do we got today? We are going to get into another bill review. Now, mind you, my bill reviews are not always necessarily a bill, okay? It's any document that comes from the government. That's what it is. And so, like, it could be an executive order. It could be a proclamation. It can be a bill, piece of legislation from local, state, or national, my Congress. It doesn't matter. If it's a formal document from the United States, then it's subject to being reviewed. Now, I will put out this disclaimer. I am not a lawyer. You might say, well, DL, why are you reviewing bills if you're not a lawyer? Because we have a system of government or governance that requires an educated populace, a populace that's willing to just simply read and make their opinions known. How else can you get out and vote for the person that you want to do the things that you want if you're not aware of what, the things that they're going to be asked to do, the things that they're going to be asked to vote on? So that's the purpose of the show. And as far as I'm concerned, if we, the people, have the governance, at the end of the day, it's all about we, the people, then there is no argument that we, the people, should not spend a little time reading and informing ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll get everything right. Doesn't mean I get everything right. Law is a specific area that people spend years going to school studying, and then they read lots of documents, historical cases and whatnot. So there are things that you might just simply not know for the fact that you're not familiar with it. But I think most of the time when I read a bill, what I find is that as long as you read a bill at face value, you can get a good sense of what it's about and whether you agree or disagree. Okay? There are specifics. So let's get into this. Let's start with some general information. So number one, January 17th, there was a flyer that got put out, and this circulated about the event. What event are you talking about? Well, if you don't know, Don Lemon, former CNN news anchor, or not news anchor, but journalist, he attended a protest. Now, he wasn't there to protest, as we'll see, but he attended a protest as an independent journalist, and he had his little film crew, and they went around and they basically talked to people. But there was an event on there was a flyer on January 17th that was circulated saying, "Hey, we're going to go do some activism." And I don't have the flyer. Perhaps I should have looked it up. That's okay. Then on January 18th, people met in a parking lot to prepare for their activities for the day. And that's where we see Don Lemon start his live stream. And in the live stream, I'm not going to show that part of the video because what I've got today is kind of long. But what we see is that he is talking he's kind of standing a little bit back from the group. The group's doing their planning. He's standing back. He's documenting it, or as he says repeatedly in the video or in the stream, that he's chronicling it. So that's January 18th. And then January 30th, then they go, and that's when the whole disruption of the church happens. Then on January 30th, roughly, Don Lemon was arrested, and I believe the next day he was released without bail. And then just recently, within the last, over the weekend, we got the actual indictment, and it appears that there are, I believe, 8 people charged in addition to Lemon. So there's 9 people total. Today, we're going to focus entirely on Lemon. I'm not going to worry about any of the other defendants in this indictment. And the reason, for the 3 reasons. Number one, most of the conversation is really about him anyway. Like when you look on social media, most of the conversation is about him. Number 2, he is the most recognizable in the video. So everybody knows who Don Lemon is. The other named people, I don't know who they are. So I can't say, well, the indictment says this, and here's the video. They either were doing this or they were not doing this, because I don't know who they are. I'm not familiar with their names and faces. And then the third reason, this is a really important reason, this is Don Lemon's live stream. So the camera was actually focused on him almost the entire time. So even if I wanted to go through and say, does the video show this person doing this? Number one, it may not be on the person at that time when they were accused of doing a thing. Perhaps there's other video that I haven't seen. Perhaps there are witnesses that have given their testimony. All that being said, I don't have any evidence. I'm just sitting back. I'm kind of doing the armchair thing. And so in order to do a proper armchair thing, I have to be able to rely on the information that I have available to me and try to make sure that whatever I talk about is based on robust evidence. So we're going to use Don Lemon's video. And the full video, it's in the show notes. You can go click on it and watch it. His live stream is about 6.5 hours long. You don't need to watch that much. The relevant video, because they went to different places, the relevant video is about 90 minutes long. Now, let me say on the outset, the goal here is not to defend Don Lemon. It's rather to review the indictment to see if the charges are accurate. And hopefully I will demonstrate to you that this is a very sloppy indictment when it comes to Don Lemon. Now, again, the rest of the defendants, perhaps it's strong for them. Perhaps they will get convicted. I don't really know. I'm only concerning myself in this show with Don Lemon because that's what so many people are talking about. So let's get into this, and we're going to talk about. We're gonna walk through. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen. I'm just going to show you some citations, and from there we will have. I will make my commentary. Okay, so let me move a couple screens here really quickly. All right, so there we are, and bam, here we are. So this is, oops, that's not the one I want to show you. How about we start there? We're going to start with the introductory allegations. Now, these are just background. This is just like laying the foundation of like, okay, here are the facts as we understand them. These aren't the things that he's necessarily going to get found guilty on or acquitted on. This is just like saying, it's like the whereas clauses, like whereas this happened, and whereas this person was at this place. But we're going to read them so that you understand, because I want you to have an understanding of the indictment in order for you, hopefully, to learn how to read them yourself and then make an assessment. Because maybe you would read it and you would see the video and you would come to a different conclusion than me. And that's fine. So here's what it says. The city's church, the church, and in that it says the church, so that's how they're going to refer to it throughout the rest of the document, is a Christian house of worship located in St. Paul, Minnesota. Okay, see? Like, yeah, it's a fact. All right, on the morning of Sunday, January 18th, 2026, at approximately 10:30 a.m., the church's pastor was leading the congregation in a liturgical service. In that service, the church's pastor and congregation were then exercising and seeking to exercise the First Amendment, right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship, a right that is also protected by a federal statute codified at Title 18, United States Code, Section 248. Okay? Again, just dealing with the facts. After the service commenced, a group of approximately 20 to 40 agitators, including all of the defendants named in this indictment, entered the church in a coordinated takeover-style attack and engaged in acts of oppression, intimidation, threats, interference, and physical obstruction alleged herein. Okay, now some of that language I would probably argue with, but this is basically what they're claiming happened. Okay, like and it's just it's a fancy legal way of saying 20 to 40 people went into the church and disrupted it. Okay, but the law uses legal terms, and many of the legal terms will be the same ones that they say you violated this section of the law. So when they're laying down their basis for their argument, they're going to use the similar terms that are in there. They're not just going to say disruptive, because if they said disruptive and then they say you violated this part of the code, and we go to the code and the word disruptive is not there, then there's a mismatch. So I would argue with some of the language here, but ultimately this is not where we want to be. So then we move on, and it says, as a result of defendants' conduct, the pastor and congregation were forced to terminate the church's worship service. Congregants fled the church building out of fear for their safety. Other congregants took steps to implement an emergency plan, and young children were left to wonder, as one child put it, if their parents were going to die. Okay? So this is just the facts of what they're saying happened. That's it. Okay? There's not really much to argue here. Now there are two counts under which defendants will be found either guilty or not guilty of. Count one, and this includes all the defendants, is conspiracy against the right of religious freedom at a place of worship. Okay, and this is 18 USC section 241. Now, this one's interesting because we're going to get into the overt acts here shortly, and it does not rely on the overt acts, but rather proving that Don Lemon and others were involved in planning. Now, this is more than just knowledge of the event or even which church they were going to attend. This is saying he helped plan this. In other words, he said, all right, on this day, we're going to go here. Yeah, that's a good idea. And then we're going to do this. And then we're going to do this. That's planning, right? Hey, can we do this? No, we shouldn't do this. Can we do this? Yes, we can do this. That would be planning, making a decision on the details. Where are we going? What are we doing? What time are we going? Those kind of questions. Okay, that's why it's part of the conspiracy. Okay, and when we say conspiracy here, we're saying in the sense of conspired, not like conspiracy theory. So then the second one is where'd my notes go here? The second count, which we'll get to here after the break, is count two. This will also include all the defendants. So that is that they intended to injure, intimidate, and interfere with the exercise of right of religious freedom at a place of worship. That is 18 USC section 248 A to B to A, right? So like there's a couple there. So if you go to like part A, part 2, and then you got part B, and then you got part 2A. Okay, so you can go and look it up if you want. So now, unlike count 1, that one, count 2, is substantive. That means failure to prove the overt actions could lead to a not guilty verdict. Okay, so count 1, it's like, hey, you conspired to do this thing. You planned it. You made decisions. You helped in the decision-making process. And then count 2 is you did these things. That's basically what we're working with. So now let's get into the conspiracy. Let's see what they have to say there. So we're going to go back to our All right, so here we are. So here's the conspiracy portions of it, okay? This is what they're laying out, the foundation of the conspiracy. Defendants conspired, and it lists their names and all that. Defendants conspired and agreed with one another. See what I mean? Like they planned it. They made decisions. And with other persons known and unknown to the grand jury to injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate multiple persons, including the clergy, staff, and congregants of the city's church. So they're basically saying here, like, look, you made plans, you agreed upon it with each other to go and do these things. So this is part of the conspire. Then, next one says, defendants Armstrong and Allen, together with other persons unknown to the grand jury, organized the operation targeting the church, which they dubbed Operation Pull-Up, and promoted it on the internet via Instagram accounts. Okay, so do you see the problem here already? This is in full. I did not leave out Don Lemon's name, because when you go through the actual document, you'll find like the overt actions and the conspiracy and several other parts. They will either say, Lemon, Fred, and Jones did this, or all defendants did this, right? So each one of the accusations specifies who it's toward. So an accusation might be toward all of them, or it might be toward specific people. And we see here that it already seems to me that this case is, not very strong, at least with Don Lemon, because they specify Armstrong and Allen as two of the specific people who organized the operation and promoted it. Okay, because this happened before January 18th, which was the day of the interference of the church. So I'm already like, I don't know. Like, you're saying that Don Lemon conspired, but then you go on to say that it was Armstrong and Allen and others who are unknown. So we don't know who they are. It might have been Lemon, but that's not known. It says that right here. Other persons unknown to the grand jury. Because if it was known, they would have wrote it. Then we go to the third one. It says all defendants met at a shopping center. Okay, so see how we've clarified? All defendants met at a shopping center for a pre-op briefing, during which Armstrong and Allen advised other co-conspirators, including defendants Kelly, Lemon, Richardson, Lundy, Cruz, Fort, and Austin, about the target of their operation, City's Church, and provided instruction on how the operation would be conducted once they arrived at church. Now, this is I don't have the video. I was trying to kind of slim down on all the videos that we're going to use. And the video, one of the videos that's going around shows Don Lemon standing back a bit from the group. So I think there's already a problem here, because it's saying, hey, he advised all these conspirators, including all these people, and Don Lemon didn't get all of the instruction, or at least not in the video that we have. Now, mind you, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's innocent in the sense that he didn't do anything. In our legal system, it's about what you can prove, not about, like, if you can't prove that somebody did something, then that means they cannot be, you should not find them guilty. The jury should not find them guilty. Okay, if it's not been proved. But again, that doesn't mean that they didn't do it. There's two different things. And I will say, just so that we're clear, I'm not defending Don Lemon. I'm reading this document and I'm saying, does it hold up when I compare it to this like roughly 90-minute video of Don Lemon at the church? Do I see these things occur in the video? Do I see any other evidence that these things indeed happened by Lemon intentionally, right? Like that's all I'm looking for. And the answer is I really don't see them. So Lemon did, again, he met with the group for the pre-op briefing, and he did hint at knowing more details. But knowing the details is not evidence of assisting in the planning or the selection of a target. And as you probably saw in the video, he physically stood away from the group. That's important because I think the argument here that Don Lemon is making is, hey, I was there as an independent journalist. I was not there as a member of the group. I was not participating. And I think when you look at journalists, that's pretty critical. Like, what were you doing there? Were you actually being a journalist and chronicling it? Or were you participating and then just trying to hide behind journalism? And a lot of people are saying right now, they're like, oh, you being a journalist, the First Amendment doesn't give you the right to disrupt a church. And that's true. But that's not what the argument that I'm not making the argument today that Don Lemon doesn't have the right or has the right to go and disrupt a church because he has the First Amendment. That would be the First Amendment versus the First Amendment. That's not the argument I'm making. I'm going to make the argument today that I think that the charges against him are weak because of his actions. All I'm saying is I don't think he's guilty of violating this law. That's it. That doesn't mean I'm thinking that he's a good guy. I don't. Doesn't mean I think he personally should have disavowed it and said, this is terrible. You shouldn't be doing this. These people have the right to come and worship in church. Now, you might ask yourself, DL, what were they doing there in the first place? There was a hint that one of the church leaders, I believe it was the pastor, that one of the church leaders was also an ICE agent. So they found this guy and they said, oh, you're an ICE agent and you're part of the leadership of this church. We're going to go disrupt this church and we're going to protest against you as an individual in this church to raise awareness. Now, again, I'm not defending that. I think that's terrible. I think that's crappy behavior. But crappy behavior doesn't necessarily mean that it's legal either, or illegal, I mean. It doesn't mean that it's illegal. You can be a jerk and not violate the law. So that's all I'm saying here. Me personally, I would say and I'll tell you toward the end or at the end, my fuller assessment of this. But I would say the church is fully within their rights to say you need to leave. And if they don't leave, physically make them leave. Now, the likelihood of that happening is pretty low for a number of reasons. One, churches generally don't get into altercations with people. Number two, they tend to want people to come in to hear the message, of course. And then number three, a lot of people, like most of the people in the church, are not going to be comfortable physically manhandling a protester to throw them out. And there were quite a few protesters. There were somewhere between 20 and 40 of them. So when you have that many people, you probably are not wanting to, as a church, to get into a clash with it. So you're just going to sit there and kind of begrudgingly deal with the fact that your service is being disrupted. So that's where we are. All right, so let's see, where are we on time here? We're about half an hour in. Okay, so let's take a quick intermission here. And I love this group. This is the Institute for Justice. We're going to take a quick intermission, then we'll be back, and we're going to walk through all of the overt actions. I'll show you some video, and then I will show you why I think that this indictment against Don Lemon is weak. So we'll be back in just a moment.
The day I got cited, I was blindsided.
I couldn't believe that I was in America. I left a place where that stuff happens, but not here. Here, this is the land of opportunity.
I didn't do anything wrong.
I just couldn't believe it. I didn't do anything wrong.
You think that you're doing things the right way. You think that you're a law-abiding citizen.
And they said I was under arrest for braiding hair, and they took me to jail.
They seized a little over $100,000 out of my business account here. Took 13 years to get it and less than 13 seconds, I guess, to take it away.
I remember my attorneys telling me, most people don't win against the government.
because I know now that we have more than just a chance. I know that we're going to keep our homes.
If we win here at the U.S. Supreme Court, it makes a difference for my girls and for so many other families.
I'm fighting back because I don't want to have a lot of other people have to go through the same thing I'm going through with their property getting seized.
We changed the laws so that everybody else can be treated fairly.
I want the opportunity
to operate my legal business,
To practice my craft.
to meet the needs of my community in an innovative way.
And someone has to stand up.
All right. Love those folks. I follow several of them on social media, and I love when they talk about, hey, we just won this case at the Supreme Court, and sometimes they'll post videos of it. So that's great. Give them a follow. And if you're so willing, go ahead and make a donation to them because they do great work. All right. So we were talking about, we walked through the conspiracy charges, and that was count one. There's not really a lot of evidence to show you because Don Lemon's video starts at the day of the event. It starts while they're there. And the problem with this, with count one, the conspiracy, is that we would need some sort of evidence to look at and say, this is the evidence that he was involved in planning, in making the selection. And there's no video prior to that. There's nothing that really ties Don Lemon. Perhaps that will come out in the trial. Perhaps they have some text messages. And if that were the case, like if there's a text message, and we'll just kind of make it really in the obvious, if there's a text message from the lead organizer that says, hey, Don, we're going to go to this church. Here's what we're doing. What do you think about that? And if he says, yeah, I think that's a good choice, then I would agree he is part of the conspiracy. Like he planned it, if he's getting it, if they're getting his permission or, getting his take or approval or whatever. But without that, I'm just going to say, I don't see any evidence of conspiring on Don Lemon's part. And it looks like from the limited amount of evidence that we see that he is standing back in a way and withholding information. But withholding information does not mean that you conspired. That just means you knew about it. So if they told him, hey, we're going to go to this church in a little bit, and then he's like, okay. And then he stands back and he's like, I'm not going to tell you where we're going. Well, that's because he's live streaming. And obviously the point of it would be if he tells them on the live stream, we're getting ready in 20 minutes to go over to this church, then somebody on the watching the live stream could run over to the church and say, hey, you got a bunch of nincompoops that are coming over here to disrupt your service. You might want to lock the doors or something, whatever you do, whatever position that you might want to take to try to prevent this. Okay. But again, that's not conspiring. That's just saying like he was following the group and then not giving out details. This would be no different in my mind if you have a correspondent that is with the military in a foreign country and they're reporting on military action and they say, hey, this division or this unit is getting ready to go on a patrol and I can't tell you where we're going right just yet, but I am allowed to follow with them. And I'm allowed to be embedded with them, and we're allowed to live stream this, right? So that would be the same. And nobody would be like, wow, you can't do that. Why? He conspired with the military to go and do this action. Nobody would say that because it doesn't make any sense. Of course, he's going to know some details. But knowing the details, again, does not necessarily mean that you are part of planning it. All right, so then we get on to count two. And again, that's where they're claiming that all the defendants, they, in fact, injured they engaged in acts that injure, intimidate, and interfere with the exercise of the right of religious freedom at a place of worship. This is 18 U.S.C. in Section 248. Okay? Now, unlike count one, again, this is substantive. That means failure to prove the overt actions that could lead to a not guilty verdict. If the overt actions are not necessary for the conspiracy part, for count one. So let's dive into the overt actions, and we're going to see what we find. Now, remember, we're only looking at Don Lemon. Given his notoriety, the video footage is primarily on him, and he was chronicling the event, as he repeatedly said. And I think that's kind of interesting. Like, if you go watch the full 90-minute segment of the church part of his live stream, you're going to find that, I don't know, multiple times, 4, 5, 6 times, he says, I'm not here as a protester. I'm here as a journalist. I'm here covering this event. I'm here chronicling. He says that to the audience multiple times, and he says it to multiple people throughout his stream. And there's in the videos that I have, there's a couple clips where you hear him saying that. So let's look at the overt actions, and we'll see what we've got. So here we are. Boom, bada bing. There we are. All right. At the pre-operation briefing, defendants Armstrong and Allen advised other conspirators, including defendants Kelly, Lemon, Richardson, Lundy, Cruz, Fort, and Austin, about the target of their operation, and provided instruction on how the operation will be conducted once they arrived at church. Okay. And then we're going to read the next one here. On the morning of January 18th, 2026, defendant Lemon began live streaming on his internet-based show, The Don Lemon Show, where he explained to his audience that he was in Minnesota with an organization that was gearing up for a, quote, resistance operation against the federal government's immigration policies, and he took steps to maintain operational secrecy by reminding certain co-conspirators to not disclose the target of the operation, and stepped away momentarily so his mic would not accidentally divulge certain portions of the planning session. So by the, and remember, they were talking about like, oh, this conspiracy, you were planning this. And then right here in the indictment, it says, stepped away momentarily so his mic would not accidentally divulge certain portions of the planning session. So he's not even involved in certain portions of it. Okay? Now, that's not bulletproof. That's just kind of like evidence against what they're claiming. All right, so we move on. And during a discussion with defendant Armstrong at the pre-op briefing, defendant Lemon thanked defendant Armstrong for what she was doing, and assured her that he was not saying what's going on, i.e. was not disclosing the target of the operation. Okay, journalists frequently are sympathetic to the cause or hostile to the cause that they're covering. The journalists very often, not all the time, and I'm not going to try to put a number on it, but frequently will be there like saying, hey, this is happening. We're just getting the details. We're asking questions we don't know. And sometimes they'll be more neutral. Sometimes they will be very much on the side of it. And they'll say, yeah, I agree, and sometimes not. So like just the fact that he thanked her, that's not, again, indicative of anything. There's no crime in thanking somebody for doing their work. There's no, to my knowledge, there's nothing that says, oh, by saying thank you, that means you have conspired. Like that doesn't rise to that level. Then it goes on. It says B, defendant Armstrong explained that Operation Pull-Up was a clandestine operation in which she and other agitators would show up somewhere that is a key location where the targets don't expect us, and we disrupt business as usual. That's what we're about to go do right now. And C, defendant Lemon said he would see her there. Okay, so he's just like, okay, I know where you're going. I will see you there. All right, so then we go on. Before heading to the church to join his co-conspirators, defendant Lemon advised his live stream audience that, quote, we're going to head to the operation. Again, we're not going to give any of the information away. So again, he's just been told this information you cannot divulge. Not until we get there. And then everybody will know where we're at. It's too late. But again, that's not a crime. It's not a crime to not report on specific information. You can call it journalist malpractice. You can call it anything you want, but it's not a crime. And then we get to, all right, so then it says, continuing on the morning of January 18th, 2026, all of the defendants got in vehicles and traveled with their co-conspirators to the church to engage in the planned takeover-style operation. Okay. So, and this is, by the way, this is overt action 10. So far, I've read overt action 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10. Now, the reason I'm skipping some is because they don't name Don Lemon either explicitly or by saying all defendants. So I'm skipping those. So if you go and you find the indictment, you're going to find that there are 29 overt acts. I'm not covering all of them, only the ones that explicitly include Don Lemon, because why would I say Don Lemon didn't do this when they aren't claiming it anyway? Make sense? Good. All right. And then the last one here on this one. While en route to the church, Defendant Richardson told Defendant Lemon that they had to catch up to the others, and Defendant Lemon replied, "Let's go catch up." And because he was still live streaming, Lemon instructed Richardson and an unidentified male, I believe that's the cameraman, don't give anything away. In other words, don't divulge information about the operation, and advised his audience, we can't say too much. We don't want to give it up. Okay, so like I look at it and I say, objectively speaking, this is the equivalent of somebody saying, yes, reporter, we're gonna allow you to come in and document this because we like you and we believe that you are going to present this in a positive light for us, right? And this is not abnormal. This happens all the time. All right. It's not uncommon for reporters to know the details of events that they are covering. It's not uncommon for them to withhold reporting specific details either. Obscuring his mic is not evidence that he conspired, just that he had some foreknowledge. And again, knowing where it is not criminal for a reporter. And it's not uncommon for reporters to be sympathetic to the cause that they're covering, or again, hostile, or sometimes just flat out neutral. Yeah. Consider multiple White House influencers reported from Gaza, not only positively, but mocking those who were claiming the issues of the food supply deliveries. Remember that? When it was like, oh, you're starving the people, the Palestinians. And then there were several right-wing influencers that are on video, and they were like, we're here. Look at all this food. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Hardy har har har. You guys are dumb if you think that, the Palestinians are being starved. Right? They did the same thing, and they knew details that they couldn't put out to their audience. And they were there, and they were very sympathetic. So the idea that somebody is sympathetic, meaning like, hey, you conspired or you violated the law, doesn't stand. All of these overt acts simply tell us that Lemon knew the location and intended to attend. That's it so far. They do not prove that he played any role in planning the event, selecting any targets, nor are they charges that he engaged in any behavior along with the protesters. All right, so let's look at this next one here. And this in this clip, I'm sorry. Continuing on the morning of January 18th, 2026, all the defendants together with co-conspirators entered the church sanctuary, with the first wave positioning themselves among the congregants and the second wave led by defendants Armstrong and Allen commencing the disruptive takeover operation, in which the first wave of agitators then actively joined. So it just says like, okay, you guys went in and you did this thing. This is the first wave, second wave. Okay, but Lemon is not here, although it does say all of the defendants at one point. So yes, all the defendants did go into the church. Okay, but going into the church in and itself, that initial act is not a crime. Churches are open. They're considered like private property, but kind of like open to the public. And churches generally say, hey, if you're come in here. Now, they don't invite you in to come in and disrupt. They do invite you in to come in and be a part of the sermon or the service, right? Sing and do the things that you're supposed to do. Let's see here. Where do I want to do? Is that it? Get the next one. Oh, yeah. Okay. So while inside the church, defendants Armstrong, Allen, Kelly, Lemon, Richardson, Lundy, Cruz, Fort, and Austin oppressed, threatened, and intimidated the church's congregants and pastors by physically occupying most of the main aisles and rows of chairs near the front of the church, engaging in menacing and threatening behavior for some, chanting and yelling loudly at the pastor and congregants, and or physically obstructing them as they attempted to exit and or move about within the church. Okay? All right. So in this clip, we're going to see that. Do I have that clip? Let me see. I think my notes are a little bit mismatched, but yeah, we're going to show a video here. So here's the thing. I can't show you the whole video because it would, like I can't address all of this because they're saying like, hey, while they were in there, they did all these things. I would have to show you the video in its entirety so we could determine whether it ever happened. Okay, I can't show you a 90-minute video, but I'll show you a clip because, again, we're focusing on Don Lemon. So here is a clip.
That's the complexity of the situation. Thank you, sir.
And I want to point out really quickly, what I did with these clips is, there's 3 of them. I sped up certain portions of them so that the clips wouldn't be too long because we're trying to make it a clip, not like, again, play 15, 20 minutes of the video. So here we go. He's talking to a guy. And if you go and you watch, he actually walks up to the guy and he's like, hey, can I talk to you? And the guy initially kind of was like, no. And he's like, oh, I'm just a reporter or whatever. And the guy's like, okay, well. And so then he starts talking to the guy. So here's where we are.
Appreciate you talking to me.
Okay.
So I'm just going to be as respectful as possible. I'm not here to intimidate anybody. Just here to chronicle and to get some answers and let people know what they've done. They pumped the music up really, really loud. Here you heard the pastor.
This is where we sped it up.
With his arms stretched up, and they're praying. But by the way, just so you know, this is what you get with independent journalism that you will not get with corporate media. I'm just here to tell you. So if you're in the chat, if you're with us, support us. Support us. Support us. Like and subscribe. Become a member. Support independent journalism because we do it without your favor. I'm not afraid to do this. Like I told you, it's going to be raw, unscripted. We got stuck in the snow trying to get here to produce it in real time. Go here. As soon as we walked in, almost perfect timing, the protesters stood up. And so what is interesting is that the protesters don't really like talking to corporate media that much. They like talking to independent media. And they tell us what they're going to do, and we just follow. Much as I did in the Capitol, Marjorie Taylor Greene got mad at me.
So he's basically talking, he's kind of comparing it to another event that he, that he's like, hey, look, I covered this other event. Marjorie Taylor Greene got mad at me, but this is what I do. I'm an independent journalist. This whole little segment is about how he's an independent journalist. No, what's interesting is if we go back a little bit, and we can see that people kind of seem to be standing in this particular clip. And like you got some people sitting, you got some people standing. They're probably irritated because they came to worship, but they're not being physically threatened. They're not being prevented from entering or leaving, right? Which is one of the big debates that people had online is they were like, oh, you violated the FACE Act. But the FACE Act requires explicitly that you have physically obstructed or you used force or the threat of force to prevent people from entering or leaving. And you can see that is not the case here in this particular clip. And then we also saw that Don Lemon himself is, number one, he is interviewing people. He is saying specifically, I'm not here to be a part of it. I'm just here chronicling it. I'm here just as an independent journalist. And then he compares it to another event that he did where he's like, I was at this other event as well doing the same thing. And this is what I mean when we say, does the evidence match the claim that's made against him? So, and if you watch the whole video, you'll notice that he actually interviews multiple people. He actually does not engage in any chanting. He doesn't hold any signs. He doesn't do anything that would suggest that he's there for any other reason other than to be a journalist. And he repeatedly tells people he's only there to chronicle the event. This is why several of the men were willing to speak with him, including the pastor. Okay? So let's go on to this next one here. All right, so here we are. Defendant Lemon told his live streaming audience about congregants leaving the church and about a young man who Lemon could see was frightened, scared, and crying. And Lemon observed that the congregants' reactions were understandable because the experience was traumatic and uncomfortable, which he said was the purpose. So again, that is not a crime. Like how many reporters have you seen on scene and they're like, there's a woman crying over here. There's a child that's sad over here. This is very traumatic. This was the purpose of the event, right? He's not saying this is why I, Don Lemon, agreed to come here because they were going to disrupt it. He doesn't say, I, Don Lemon, really appreciate that they're disrupting this, these people, because that's how we planned it. He's not saying that. He's just literally telling you what's happening on the ground. So he is covering an event. Reporters have covered war and many other events where the people that were there were traumatized, scared, and even unwilling participants. And like it or not, that is a reporter's job. Let's see. Go on to the next one here. As the operation continued, Defendant Lemon acknowledged the nature of it by expressing surprise that the police hadn't yet arrived at the church and admitting knowing that the whole point of the operation is to disrupt. And this is one of the overt actions. So this is overt action number, which one number is it? It's 21. This is where, we've looked at, for Don Lemon, we looked at 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 15, 20, and now we're on 21. Okay, so all of these, they're exactly what you would expect a reporter to do in any other situation where they got heads up and said, hey, this thing is going to be happening, or we got to beat feet. We got to get over there. Remember back in the 90s, I don't know if they still do it now, but I assume they do. But like in the 90s, you'd see in the movies where the reporter and they've got like a driver and they've got like their crew, and they jump in the van. They're like, quick, we got to go. We got to tip that such and such thing is happening at such and such place, right? It's the same concept. Was he sympathetic to it? Yeah, he was sympathetic to it. Again, that's not a crime. All right, let's go on to the next one. All right, while the takeover operation was underway, Defendant Lemon asked Defendant Armstrong, who is the person that we should talk to? Is there a pastor or something? And she pointed toward the front of the church, but noted the pastor might have run away. Okay, I don't really know how this overt action, since when would a reporter on the ground not say who is in charge here that I should talk to? Like, of course they're going to. That's what they want to talk to, somebody that knows something. They're not going to be like, hey, is there a child that's frightened that I can go talk to and get some information on this, what's happening here, what their thoughts are? No, he's going to say, I want to talk to, a member of the church or the pastor. So he asked who the leader was. On the surface, it seems kind of laughable, but again, that's who he's going to ask. And maybe he's playing dumb about the details or doesn't know them. I don't know. But if he's playing dumb, it's, it limits the case against him. Actually, it limits the case against him whether he's playing dumb or really doesn't know. And what I mean by that is, if he doesn't know who the pastor is, who he should talk to, then that kind of suggests that maybe he wasn't as involved in the planning of it in the first place. This is the point this is why you have to read these things and understand what is the claim being made against him. All right, next one. With other co-conspirators standing nearby, defendants Lemon, Richardson, and Fort approached the pastor and largely surrounded him to his front and both sides, stood in close proximity to the pastor in an attempt to oppress and intimidate him, and physically obstructed his freedom of movement while Lemon peppered him with questions to promote the operation's message. Well, let's look at the video. Let's see what the video of this says, because as it turns out, we happen to have that. Now, I want to point out really quickly, again, remind you, there are segments of the video that are sped up just because they're part, maybe moving, talking, whatever, and there's nothing critical to watch there. And then also in this particular video, the second one and the third one, I did cut out portions of it only because I was trying to shorten the video. So you could go and watch and you're going to see that I didn't leave out any pertinent information. All I did was okay, if you're talking to this guy for 5 minutes and there's the same thing is happening in the scene for 5 minutes, then I cut it down to a minute or something like that, with the exception of the parts that I wanted to play. Okay, so when you see that, don't be alarmed. Don't be like, oh, DL's, hiding some information. You can go and watch it for yourself. All right. And then, by the way, it starts out a little choppy because they're inside of a church building and they're live streaming, and so they're having signal problems. So it is playing, but just note that there are some problems initially. And I left them in there because you can see that Don Lemon is at the side of the church and moving toward the front, like they said to talk to the pastor. All right, it's still playing, don't worry. All right, it cuts out for a second. This is unedited. All right, so now he's talking to the pastor. He's at the front, and you can see that the pastor could easily just walk away, but he doesn't. All right, still playing. I promise you it's still playing. I didn't want to edit anything I didn't have to.
Pastor of the church.
All right.
Our church had gathered for worship, which we do every Sunday, and we were interrupted by this group of protesters. Yeah. We asked them to leave, and they obviously have not left.
So. What do you think of this?
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution and the First Amendment to.
Okay, so he does indicate, like, hey, I've got to go and take care of my flock. And Don Lemon doesn't force him to stay. He starts asking a question, as a reporter would do, to try to elicit a response and try to basically get him to stay there. You don't have to like it. In fact, we generally probably shouldn't like reporters because they are a pain in the ass. But this is what reporters do. They get in there and they're constantly trying to ask questions to get somebody to engage back. You know, because if they just asked a simple question and the person walked away, they'd never have much of a story. So they've got to be a little more aggressive. But they're not being aggressive in the physical obstruction of him, right? He doesn't say, hey, you guys need to get out of the way. Hey, let me through. He doesn't say any of that. He's like, hey, you need to leave. I need to take care of my flock. Let's continue.
Freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So that's one of the pastors of the church.
Oh, that's weird.
And it's kind of loud, so I can't hear him.
That's very weird. Did you see that? Once the pastor basically ended the conversation, he walked off without any obstruction, right? And then the video pans away, so we can't see any further. So at least Don Lemon was not physically obstructing him. Now let's go back to our document here. All right, and so we'll go to the next one here. It says, while talking with the pastor, defendant Lemon stood so close to the pastor that Lemon caused the pastor's right hand to graze Lemon, who then admonished the pastor, please don't push me. I'm not really sure how this proves anything other than he got up in the man's face. But again, that's what journalists do. Like it or hate it, that's what they do. They get in your face and they're like, but don't you got something to say? Don't you think this is a freedom of speech issue? Don't you think this? That's what they do. All right? So that was over at Act 24 and then 25 here. Although the pastor told defendant Lemon and the others to leave the church, defendant Lemon and the other defendants ignored the pastor's request and did not immediately leave the church. This one I actually agree with. It is true that Lemon does not leave. And for that, I would argue he should be charged with trespass. But trespass is not a federal crime in this particular instance. All right, so let's go on to this next one. I think this is the last one. At one point, defendant Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church where he confronted some congregants and physically obstructed them as they tried to exit the church building to challenge them with facts about U.S. immigration policy. All right, well, we got video of that. We're going to watch it. So let's go to the video and let's see what we've got. Here we are.
I'm surprised that law enforcement has not showed up yet.
All right. Now, I want you to notice in here really quickly. You see that people are still standing around and there doesn't appear to be anybody physically obstructing anybody. Now, again, this is just in the video here. That's not to say it didn't happen at any point in time. This was roughly a 90-minute event. And we only have video footage of Don Lemon. Okay, so it's possible that somewhere somebody obstructed. Like there is an accusation that parents were obstructed from getting access to their children. And in the indictment, it says that they had to go around to a different way to pick up their kids. And in that particular case, if they can identify who it was and they can prove that, yes, these people were obstructing us from getting to our children, then yes, they should be punished for that. And they would be in violation of the law. And I would argue, just in throwing it out there, the protesters would be very lucky because bad things will happen if you get between me and my son, period. If I'm at church and I go to pick up my son and there are protesters in my way, intentionally obstructing me from getting to my son, bad things will happen. The situation would not have been as pleasant because you will not get in between me and my child or me and my wife, period. Okay, so if you're a protester out there, be mindful, because if you go to a church and you stop a parent from getting to their child and they punch you square in the face, I will all day, every day, I will support jury nullification. Yeah, that person will be charged for assault, and I will tell everyone, nullify it. Yes, that person was guilty of punching you in the face, and the circumstances the law does not have a provision for these kind of circumstances. So we're going to nullify in this instance and say they did it, but they shouldn't be found guilty. That's what I will do. And they will walk free as far as I'm concerned. Like, I will support them walking free. So just if you're a protester, I just want to point that out. All right, let's play this video.
So we'll see. Let's go out front and see what's happening. Let's go out front.
All right. So now he exits the side of the door.
Yeah, that was interesting to watch.
All right.
And you know, as imagine it's uncomfortable.
And I want to point out, you see these people in the background? They're freely walking away. They're coming from the front of the church and they're leaving. Now, again, I'm not supporting disrupting churches. All we're trying to do is say, does the indictment stand based on the evidence? That's all. Right. So Don Lemon, so far, no video has been obstructing people.
Police are here. They haven't come in yet.
Right.
But police are here.
Comes around to the front.
This is where folks are leaving.
All right. So here he is at the front. And the allegation was, let me read it to you again. Where do we go? It's that at one point, Defendant Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church. Here he is. And physically obstructed them as they tried to exit the church building to challenge them with facts about U.S. immigration policy. Okay? So that's what we're looking for. All right? And I did, again, speed up some parts of it. And because some of the conversations with people were long, I cut out those parts. But you can go and look and see that it doesn't change anything. So let's continue watching.
Showing that's inside the church area where they are. So Pastor Lemon can see pastor talking members of the church as they are about to leave.
All right, people are walking out. He's holding the door.
I'm a Christian here that wants to praise the Lord with my son, and now I got to go home. I'm sorry that you guys are so angry.
I'm just chronicling. I'm not with the group.
Oh, that's weird. He repeatedly says this every time he talks to me. I'm just chronicling. I'm not with the group. Every time. And that's why people were willing to talk to him. All right, let's continue.
What do I have to say? Do you understand why they're angry? I don't understand any of this because I'm a simple man. I'm a simple man who loves the Lord and has a good father. So this is what we'll interview right now because I want to be with my son. It's Sunday. It's time for rest and for renewal. And I'd like to answer your questions. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so he lets the man go. Right? The man walks away. He's like, hey, I'm not with the group. The guy's like, oh, okay, blah, blah. I cut out some portion of the conversation. They had a longer conversation. And then when the man was done, he's like, well, walks away. And Don Lemon's like, all right, see you later. People are still leaving.
A couple members are speaking. They're upset. You can imagine. Of course, they would be upset. So the crowd has significantly dwindled. And the reason. Can I talk to you, sir? What do you think of this?
Okay. Can I talk to you, sir? And then now this is the guy that he challenged on facts. So let's watch this. And I want you to observe whether or not Don appears to be physically obstructing anybody by not letting them through. And you can see where he is in proximity to the door. He's to the side of it. The man actually is in front of the door. I wouldn't say he's obstructing either. I'm just saying they're standing there, which is very normal. You ever been to a church service and then people talk afterwards? They stand in front of the door sometimes and talk. And then people are like, oh, excuse me, I got to get out. Right? That's not physically obstructing.
You know, I agree with everybody's freedom to protest. These people have come to our house and they interrupted our worship. This is a house of peace, and we try to proclaim that in this church vision and language. And in the end, it's not helpful. Ultimately, I believe they lost. They didn't get a house of worship. Everybody's gone home. Their point has been proven worthless. And so, in the end, I think they lose. But more importantly, if I was to break into any of their houses uninvited, cause derision and upset, according to their values, I would be kicked out. Ultimately, it's not
so people are still walking around, right? He's talking to the man. That's where I cut out some portion of it.
I'm not saying it's pretty. I'm not saying it's not messy. I'm not saying it couldn't be better. I'm saying this is a part of a much larger dialogue in which
All right, so I slowed it. I come back here. Now we're slowing it back down to normal speed because I want you to hear the conversation that they're having.
Administration caused a great deal of chaos and havoc and danger for American citizens, and another is trying to correct that.
Do you believe that? Why honestly,
okay.
let me talk to you just on the
not
facts.
A journalist.
Yes, I am. I want to give you the facts.
No.
Did you know that undocumented people?
Okay, so he's following the man. The man is starting to walk away. There's no physical obstruction.
And immigrants commit far less crime than American citizens?
We're done here. We're done here.
Than natural-born Americans? You won't listen.
If you could ask
I'm giving you the facts. It is.
Give me facts. I would have a conversation.
But I can respond to you.
No,
did Jesus stand with the oppressed?
Because he doesn't want to listen to facts. That's the interesting thing about this is that they won't listen to facts.
No.
Okay, So Don now is talking to the audience and says, that's the interesting thing. They won't listen to facts. I don't necessarily agree with him. Like I'm if I go to church, I'm not there to listen to some reporter's facts, whether they're true or not. Okay? I am there to worship or participate with the rest of the members. So I think Don Lemon is framing this in a way that tries to make them look bad, but he fails. I think the ultimate thing that we need to look at is these people were there to worship. They weren't there to be bombarded by a bunch of protesters and then have to listen to the facts. All right, but now this man re-engages on his own. He hears Don Lemon criticizing him. He's like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Oh, because
when you
because
pose as a journalist,
I am a journalist. Journalists give facts.
And then you start correcting me with facts and don't have.
You shouldn't hear the facts.
Okay, so the man on site says, when you pose as a journalist, okay, that's not in the indictment. And then he says, and when you ask me questions and then you challenge me on facts, okay, none of that is in the indictment. None of it. Okay, because that's what reporters do. And do they have a bias? Absolutely. I'm not at all claiming that Don Lemon doesn't have a bias. He absolutely does. And I think every journalist does. Okay? But again, we're trying to identify, do these overt acts, do these counts, do they make sense? Are they good charges against Don Lemon? Now, they may be good toward other people, but I haven't seen it. But what you didn't see out of this, what you didn't hear from this man, is him say, you stopped me from leaving the church. He says, like, you disrupted our church, but he doesn't say, you prevented me from leaving. That is part of the requirement for count 2. All right. Let's continue. That's all.
Most of the people who pick up entertaining are not people that have no criminal
He follows the
record.
man.
None.
Right?
Immigrants commit far less crime than native-born Americans. So they want to do. Anyways, these folks are still out here.
All right. Now they're outside.
All right. Let's talk to
All right. So that's the end of that. All right. So in that clip, we saw people freely passing Don Lemon. He does challenge a man on the facts, and that's true. And then he follows him, and the man continues on his own to speak with Lemon. Reporters often hound people for comment or even to debate the details. That is their job, to get a story, a comment, something that they can publish. Let me get to my conclusion here. All right? Again, this is not a defense of Lemon. Personally, I think the protesters, Lemon and his crew, I think they were all vile people for doing this. Okay? But again, vile, wrong, that doesn't mean they broke the law. The law says, you did this, here is the criteria for proving that you did this. I think this indictment is sloppy. I think for Don Lemon, I don't think the case is very strong at all. It doesn't prove conspiracy, that is, that he was engaging in planning of the event or selecting the target. Now, clearly somebody did, but I don't see any evidence anywhere that Don Lemon did. Again, perhaps when they go to trial, perhaps, the prosecution will say, here are some text messages that we were able to retrieve, whatever, right? I don't know. They might have that information. But from the information publicly available currently, I do not see that there is any evidence at all for conspiracy. And then Don Lemon, he repeatedly tells the audience and people present that he's not with the group and only chronicling. He seeks out comments from both the church members, asking them questions, and the protesters. You might remember January 6th, there's a guy named Stephen Horn. He went to the Capitol to document the event, and he actually got charged. Now, I don't think he should have been charged, but he did. Part of the reason from news reports that he was charged is because he did not appear to be doing any journalism. And that's because he asked, the court saw that in his video, he asked almost no questions of anybody. Like, he didn't go and say, hey, what's going on? Do you support this? Why do you think this is a good idea? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? He asked no questions. And he is on video participating in the January 6th protesters' chants. Don Lemon does not do any of this. So I do believe that Don Lemon was likely supportive of the event. I mean, he told us in as much throughout the video. But that is not criminal. And I would say, if you ask me, Dio, should they be charged with anything? I would say I would support trespass charges. But that is unlikely given the tenuous relationship between the White House and Minnesota, because trespass charges in this case are not going to be federal. I don't think that you could even make I think it would be thrown out of court if you tried to say, oh, because it's not federal property. But you can be trespassed for private property. Their initial walking into the church is not trespassing, correct? Because the church is open. They're like, hey, we're having service. People walk in. That's what they do. But the moment they started disrupting and the moment that they were asked to leave, I would say those are the moments that they were trespassing very clearly. And so if they, they should be arrested for that. I would further support, like I said before, the church physically removing protesters or calling police to do so. See, do I have time to tell you a story quickly? I could tell you a quick story. Let me tell you a story, because not only am I saying I think it's acceptable for church members to physically remove people, I personally have done it myself. So many years ago, you guys know, audience members know, that I was a youth director at a church. And we dealt with the kids that I dealt with. They were all in their teens. They were high school age. Almost all of them were kids from like the other side of the tracks, the wrong side of the tracks, the ones that are always in trouble with the law. They're poor and they get in trouble with the law all the time. These particular ones, right? And so there was one young man. He was having a quarrel with the girl and her boyfriend. And the girl and her boyfriend, the girl's parents were all there together. So there's like 4 of them. And I think she had a younger brother, I think. So I think there was 5 technically. So there was a quarrel between the boy, his name is Terry, and the others. I told Terry, I said, just go home, let it go, drop it. I thought he would do that. I went about my way doing other things. A few minutes later, somebody comes and grabs me, and they say, there's about to be a fight in the parking lot. And I was like, what? Actually, I sounded more manly than that. I was like, what? Okay, just being silly. So I go out and I see the father with a rock in his hand advancing toward Terry. The mom, the daughter, and the boyfriend are all in the car. So now I'm livid. Now you might say, well, Dale, you're mad at the dad? Like, no, I told Terry to leave. He did not leave. I flew over there, grabbed him by his jacket, physically dragged him off the church property, screaming at him. By the way, the kid was bigger than me, just saying. In case anybody wants to get tough with me, just know that your size does not intimidate me. So I'm dragging him. I'm screaming at him, yelling at him, I told you to go home. You were supposed to go home. And I basically shoved him when we got toward the end of the property. I shoved him and I said, go home now. And he did. Then I went back in and I was talking to my ex-wife, my wife at the time. And I told her what happened. And I said, we need to go visit him after we leave, because I'm going to tell him he can't come back. Because he did not so much that he didn't do what I said, like that was going to happen because of the students that we're working with. But it was because he didn't do what I asked and almost caused a whole ass fight between him and a parent and perhaps the boyfriend. And I don't know what they were quarreling about anyway. I don't know. It was probably like, like you're my girlfriend. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Right? So we went over to his house afterward. And I said, and his mom and dad were there. And I said, dude, I asked you to leave. You didn't leave. You started an altercation, with somebody's dad, the whole family. And I said, so if you come back in the next 6 months, I will have you trespassed. Period. That's what I said. So I'm not just sitting back, armchair quarterbacking and been like, oh yeah, they should have just thrown them all out. I agree that with that large, I was dealing with one. 20 to 40 is much different, right? 20 to 40 people, unless you've got like a 10,000 member church, that's going to be, I don't expect you necessarily. All I'm saying is I would support you if you did, because that is your property. That is the property of whoever legally owns it. I would also say, in some sense, it's also the property of the church members who support it with their finances and showing up and all of the work that they do. So I would support the pastor saying, you need to leave or we will physically throw you out. And if it came down to that and they physically threw them out and somebody got hurt, a protester, I would say, too bad. FAFO, that's what I would say. You showed up, you didn't belong, You didn't leave when you were asked. You got thrown out. Okay? Now, I don't think this case is really a First Amendment case. A lot of people are claiming that it is. I think what happens is the way that the administration has went about it has made it one. Because they're charging Don Lemon with all these things that aren't even accurate. And the counter to it is, hey, I was engaging as a journalist, and I did not violate the law in the way that you said I did. So I think that the administration has made it a First Amendment case, not that it actually is. Overall, I say the case is sloppy, and I suspect Don Lemon will walk. I cannot speak for the others charged, but I will give it a 50-50 chance because mostly what I saw in the video was disruption, which again is despicable, but it's not the crime as laid out. Like other than the conspiracy, obviously somebody had to plan it. So if you can figure out who it was that planned it and the people that promoted it on social media the day before, those people, I would argue, probably did plan it, right? But it's not a guarantee. Like somebody else could plan it and say, DL, we're planning an event. We're going to give you a flyer. Will you post it? And I say, yeah, sure. And then I posted. In fact, I have done that. Back during COVID, there was a local group that was planning to demonstrate in front of the city, in front of City Hall. And I found out about it, and I said, we'll post it on the Libertarian Party of Duval County's website. And we did. And then when I was interviewed by media, because I did attend, when I was interviewed by media, I said, we didn't have anything to do with the planning. I saw the flyer. We reposted it because we believe in people's First Amendment right to go and protest. Now, that situation was a bit different because we were on public property and we were not disrupting any business at all. We were simply outside protesting on public property. Very different. So in that sense, I would say we were not being despicable. In the case of Don Lemon, I would say, or the church, I would say the protesters were being despicable. But again, despicable is not in itself a crime. You can do things that are terrible to your fellow man. Let me rephrase that. You can behave like a jerk, and it's not necessarily a crime. Okay? Because what matters is, what does the law spell out? Did you violate that? That's what matters. As far as I see, Don Lemon, as much as I hate to really defend him because I don't like him, I don't see a crime here from Don Lemon. I don't see it. And I think he'll walk. That's what I got, folks. Let's check out the comments. Let's go to the live chat here. And bam. All right, let's see what you guys are saying. Let's see. Yay, IFJ and DL. I mean, not quite and. I'm just supporter. Like, most of them don't even know who I am. But yeah, both of us, we're going to do our best to represent the law faithfully. They're going to do it in the legal sense. I'm going to do it in the commentary sense. All right? Boo, jerks. Yes, Keith. Yes. Some people are jerks. And that's unfortunate. That's the world we live in. Let's see. Interesting NAP question to me. If someone is blocking access to my property, may I use force within the NAP? Now, I'm not giving legal advice. According to the non-aggression principle, if somebody is blocking access to your property, then I would argue depends on where they are. If they are on your property, then I say you can physically remove them, which means now you can get to your property. If they are on, like, the road, I don't know. Legally, I would say probably not. Again, that's not legal advice. I'm just my interpretation of the law. But would it be a violation of the non-aggression principle for them to obstruct you from getting to your property? I'm probably going to fall on the side of, in a libertarian world, yes, it would be. If you are stopping me from getting to my property, because there could be any number of reasons why I need to get to that property. Maybe I just want to go home and take a nap, and you're violating the nap. Get it? Anyway. Or perhaps I need to go and get my son and take him to school or whatever. I need to go and, my wife is like, hey, calls me up and says, hey, you need to come home. I'm having a problem here, blah, blah, blah. And then I go and somebody's obstructing me. And then I would say, I need to get home to my wife. You are interfering with my my abilities, my freedom of movement. You are interfering with me being able to get to my wife, so that would be freedom of association. So I would say, could I shove you out of the way to get where I need to go? If that's only, I would say it's not a violation of the NAP. It may be a violation of the law because you will have to prove that, one, you legally had the right to shove somebody, to put your hand on somebody, and then two, that your only intention was just to get past. So I don't know where the law would fit on that, but I would say as far as the NAP, I would probably be comfortable with it, depending on all the details. Let's see. I wonder why these protesters do not do their activity at a biker bar. Maybe they're all closed on Sunday. I don't know if they're closed on Sunday, but it is a good point. And to bring it more, closer to home, imagine that somebody who worked at the biker bar was also an ICE agent, right? Maybe they part-time, they work at the biker bar because whatever, and they're a part-time ICE agent. Would the protesters go there? Probably not. Because like I said, if you show up to somebody's business, or, organization, especially when it's open to the public, yes, you can go in, but if they ask you to leave and you don't, then I would argue they have the right to physically remove you. And I would not doubt that bikers would absolutely physically remove you. So go ahead and try that one out, protesters, if you want. But I would advise against it. That's what I would do. All right. That's my show. That's a wrap for this episode. Hope you found it informative and inspiring. Do me a favor, folks. Stop back by later and drop a comment with your thoughts. Did I miss anything? Do I need to offer a correction? Perhaps you want to be promiscuous with praise. Whatever the case, I'm all ears. But with that being said, I'm out. I will see you tomorrow. You know that I'm all about supporting organizations that hold my values. Make sure you head on over to blackgunsmatter.shop. They've got apparel, stickers, and more. Use the code LibertyDad, all one word, at checkout to score a 10% discount. Or just hit the referral link in the show notes. That'll make it so much easier. Remember, I'm not just a voice on a mic. I'm a dad who's working hard to deliver to you the best libertarian content. Connect with me on Linktree, where you'll find links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, because every bit helps keep this show rolling. Plus, you can find me on my other platforms to stay in the loop. With your help, this show, The Message of Liberty, will be seen and heard by more people. As always, I appreciate you tuning